As a rabbi, I often get asked, what made you want to be a rabbi? Some of you may know the story, but there's actually a story that I don't know if I've ever told until now to anyone. You'll see why. I was 15 at the time when the thought occurred to me for the first time. So, some background here. One of my good friends that was in rabbinical school with me and is now a rabbi, well, his father is a rabbi. His older brother is a rabbi. Runs in the family. Just like in other professions, it's not uncommon to find these miniature dynasties. But as for me and my family, and as far as I know, it's only me, which means I had no concrete experience. Sure, I spent a lot of time at my synagogue and I knew my rabbi, but he was at least 3 or 4 times my age at the time, and he might as well have been some sort of otherworldly creature. Rabbi, it just seemed like a career that's set apart from all the others. It's not the same as deciding to be a chef or a teacher or an artist. And I was vaguely aware at the time that people who serve as religious leaders would often speak about being called. So I started to look for my calling. I prayed. I said, God, please, if this is what I'm supposed to do, give me a sign. Surprisingly, God responded the next day. I know I was 15 because I know I was in freshman geometry class because earlier that year I had spent a few class periods adamantly not learning geometry and instead figuring out how to construct a geometrically perfect Star of David. That would be 2 equilateral triangles placed atop each other using nothing but a compass and a straight edge. And in case you're a visual person, this is what I'm talking about. And as you know, if you've heard how I am perhaps one of the fastest people to be able to count up to 40 people on a bus, you know I am very proud of accomplishments that mean absolutely nothing. So I'm very proud of this. And despite it having been probably 20 or 25 years since the last time I did one of these, when I ran and picked up Davis's cheapest and maybe only compass less than an hour before services, this is faith. I bet I can still remember how to do it. And I timed myself. 2 minutes, 37 seconds. Got it right the first try. I'm telling you this because it's important for the story, I promise. And in case that wasn't visual enough, here you go. This is what, if you spend the extra 2 minutes, you can make it look like this, which is probably easier to see from where you are. Anyway, I'd made dozens of these by this point, by the day that God spoke to me, and it became my equivalent of essentially doodling. So there I was, adamantly not learning history or German or whatever, so I could focus on making stars. And all of a sudden, I made a mistake. It was the first time since I had figured out how to make these things that I had ever made a mistake. That was my sign. And again, 25 years later, I got it right on the first time. Emphasis, I could do that in my sleep. Like any good 15-year-old with an undeveloped frontal cortex, that was enough for me to put the idea away for the remaining decade or so and to move on to something else. Lawyer it is, I said. We're in the second parsha of Deuteronomy this week. Here's where we read the second telling of the 10 Commandments, the Shema, the Ve'ahavta. Come back next year if you want to learn about any of that stuff. Tonight, I want to share just one line from chapter 6, verse 16. You shall not put Adonai your God to the test as you did at Massah. If you have no idea what happened at Massah, don't feel bad because I didn't either when I was reading it this week. But if you flip back to Exodus, you'll remember the story. But you'll see, this is where it comes from, quote, and the people contended with Moses and they said, give us water to drink, end quote. On its face, this doesn't seem like much. However, Nachmanides suggests it's not about the water. Indeed, when I read that, I thought instantly of my own life, including this last week and a couple days ago. And anyone that's ever had young kids, you've no doubt taken your kids somewhere, and as soon as you cross the parking lot, Daddy, I need water. I need water right now. Really? You were just in a car for 25 minutes with your water bottle right next to you. It's not about the water. So what was it about it for the Israelites? A few verses later, the Torah gives us a pretty clear answer. Quote, "And he called the name of the place Massah, trial, and Meribah, contention, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and they're putting Adonai to the test, saying, 'Is God among us or not?'" End quote. So, as Nachmanides argues, among others, the Israelites didn't actually need water. What they needed, or what they wanted, was for God to do something, anything, just to prove that God was actually there. As Nechama Leibowitz writes in her commentary, this makes our relationship to God conditional, or would make their relationship to God conditional. We worship you so long as you give us reason to. There's no faith, there's no trust, simple transaction. We have plenty of transactional relationships in our lives. Few that I think any of us would consider meaningful. Paying for my cup of coffee, 2 seconds after I put away my wallet, both I and the barista will have forgotten about each other for the rest of our lives. And that's okay, I think, but that's not the kind of relationship we would ever want from God. About 10 years after I heard from God, or didn't, I found myself studying at Pardes, which is a progressive yeshiva in Jerusalem. In hindsight, maybe that should have been a sign. I was there over the summer, having taken some time off from my job working as a synagogue youth director and a religious school teacher. This was my vacation, and I was spending it studying Jewish text. I had some signs I should have seen. Anyway, I took a class on the Torah, taught by an Orthodox woman named Tova Leah. Our entire 3-week class, all we did was study Parashat Lech Lecha from the book of Genesis. We would do this for 2 or 3 hours each day. I don't believe we got through more than half of the parashah in our entire 3 weeks. Nonetheless, that class opened my eyes to a side of Judaism I did not know was there or that I would ever want to learn more about. At some point, we were debating the age-old question in our class: why did God choose Abraham as the person to go start the religion? After all, the Torah says nothing about Abraham or his character or what made him right for the job. Just says God picked him, God called out to him. And as we're discussing, offering various theories, Tova Leah offered a one-sentence explanation that genuinely changed my life. As she said, God didn't choose Abraham. God didn't choose Abraham because God actually called out to everyone. Abraham was the only one who listened. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I want to clarify. Tova Leah did use a semicolon, so that is one sentence that I just read. But in that moment, it hit me all at once. Abraham set off on a journey that had been offered to everyone, but that only he decided to take, and that is what made him special. In that moment, I realized not only did I not receive a sign from God at the tender age of 15, but that I didn't actually ever want one. Why did you decide to become a rabbi? Because the first day of school, I was assigned to locker 613. I say that somewhat jokingly, but let me be clear. The issue isn't about having an odd answer to that question. It's about our role to God and to ourselves. No one knows when you are supposed to bow during services. If you do, bravo, no one else does. It's not your fault, by the way, it's the rabbi's fault. Bowing is a sign of respect. That much I think we can all agree on. And you've noticed we often bow at Baruch Atah Adonai, and it would be reasonable to assume that we bow whenever we say those words. But reasonable assumption and Judaism usually do not go together. So why isn't it that way? Why does it seem arbitrary and random where we bow? In short, the rabbis were concerned that excessive bowing would lead to a relationship of subservience. Our relationship with God is meant to be a partnership as they understood it. And at times, we have equal roles. The God I believe in, at least, is not responsible for war in the Middle East because the God I believe in has no power to stop it. That's our job. We must take action. Yes, we pray and we ask God for things, but we will not pray our way out of the problems in our lives. God will not tell us, at least not in any direct sense, what to do. Instead, God has given us intellect, God has given us free will, God has given us courage, God has given us conscience, all the tools we need to make the decisions ourselves. I said that God didn't give me a sign, but it does still bug me. How is it that I had made dozens of these stars, and a day or two after I asked God for guidance, I make a mistake for the first time? You've gotten to know me, at least somewhat well, I hope, over the last 3 years, and you know I'm far too rational to believe in hippy-dippy stuff, but this is as close as I can get. Sometimes, every now and then, I think that God did play a role, or at least, here's the rational side of me that came to me in the first half of the service, the godliness that is within me that guides me, the godliness that is inside all of you as well, that part of me made me make that mistake. Not to tell me that I shouldn't become a rabbi, but setting me down the path where I, and I alone, would end up being the only one that was going to make that choice. Thank God I did. Shabbat shalom.